Welcome back to Cycle Sports TV and part 2 of our interview with Racetech founder Paul Thede. Today, Paul talks about some of the biggest misconceptions about motorcycle suspension, how the gold valve came about, and how you can learn everything you ever needed to know about motorcycle suspension in just 6 days. All on Cycle Sports TV.
Actually, there are so many, it's hard to pinpoint one, but I mean, if we talked about actually how the suspension works, I would say the concept of rebound damping. Because rebound damping, most people think that the faster you go, the more rebound damping you need, and they just slow things down, or they think that, gee, the bike is kicking, and so it must be recoiling uncontrollably and smacking them in the butt. So, and they think it's a lack of rebound kind of a problem, and that's not the case. Most of the average guys won't even touch any of the clickers. A misconception there is, kind of stock's best. I mean, it's kind of one of my jokes, and they go, and I go, stock's best, practice, practice, practice. Stock being best, and I don't want to mean any disrespect to any of the manufacturers, but I mean, think about this as a manufacturer. You're going to build a motorcycle, and you're going to make it perfect for who? The average guy. Well, who the heck is that? And what the heck kind of riding is he doing? And if you think about it on a dirt bike end of it in particular, if you were to set it up too soft or to set it up too stiff, which would you set it up for? Most of the manufacturers recognize that they have less liability issues, and frankly, they'll have less complaints if they set it up too stiff. Because what happens is, if somebody crushes the suspension and they bottom it, on a dirt bike, they'll go, guys will go, this thing's a piece of junk, I just crushed that suspension. But if it deflects all over the place and it's way too stiff, they just go, gee, I just need to ride it a little bit harder. And on a sport bike, misconception would be is that if you're going faster, everything's got to be way stiffer, and it's got to have way more damping. It's got to have, frankly, there is some truth to that, but there's also a lot of untruth to that. And it's all a matter of a relative thing. And if I say too much damping compared to what is really the question. And so, riders have this kind of feel, about their motorcycles, and they don't really know whether it's good or bad. They just go ride it. And so some of them won't touch it at all. And actually, most of them won't touch it at all. I started working on suspension right as the long travel revolution started. I actually worked on it a bit before that, but was really not much, and so I think the biggest misconception back then was more is better. And of course, this is America, so more is still better, but back then they were going for 15 inches of travel and that kind of stuff, and there was imbalances all over the place. Geometry was going crazy. Chain forces and anti-squats were going out the window, and it was things that people really didn't understand. But I'd say probably the biggest thing was more is better. As far as travel was concerned, there was an overshoot. It didn't take long for motorcycles to have 15 inches of rear wheel travel. And that's a bit, and they've kind of backed down more towards the 12 inches, the 300 millimeter mark. And a lot of that has to do with the pitch changes of chassis, as well as the changes in anti-squat with the rear end. And so they've kind of backed off on that a bit. But yeah, there's certainly a learning curve on all this. And I think there's a learning curve as we still continue on. What I was doing was I've always been looking to improve on the stock suspension. And with that, the normal thing to do, especially back then, the normal thing to do was take the stock design of piston, play with the shims, the valving stacks, that kind of thing, and reshape the damping curves to make them work. And what I was doing is I was working kind of in directions, and I would always end up at a kind of a wall where I could improve it, I could continue to improve it, but it came to a point where I couldn't improve it any further, no matter what I did. And virtually there are an infinite number of ways to valve suspension, but what I landed on was that the actual piston design became the restricting factor. And what I did was I changed, or actually made new pistons that had bigger ports. And of course, the first thing that people think of when they think bigger ports is, ooh, the thing's going to blow through the traveling bottom. But really what's happening is we're transferring control of the damping from the piston to the shim stack. And so it allows us to have a lot more flexibility as to what we're doing with the shims themselves. And so basically, once I created the gold valve and we went out testing with it and got better and better results with it, the question became, do you want to package this thing and make it into a kit form, or do you want to have people send their stuff in and have you do the suspension, in-house? And what I had been looking to do for years and years and years was to figure out how can I work with other people as opposed to against them. And whether it's a dealership or an individual rider or a race team or what have you, and by putting the gold valve into a kit, it really allows me to work with people as opposed to against them. Now it's like, hey, how can I help you successfully install this, or how can I help you make your suspension work better? And in the process, dealerships and individuals are doing installs, and the business is international as opposed to just guys sending stuff into me. It was really a big shift in context, or the whole concept of putting in the form of a kit and having other people do it was quite a bit different, in the industry. The industry is reasonably secretive kind of an industry. Motors are like that, and almost anything in racing is like that, where if you've got a little edge, you don't want to let other people know what the edge is. And so I was actually in a place in my career where I said, it's time to do something different, and I was willing to risk it all basically to work with a different philosophy. And it was a bit different and quite a scary thing at that time, but in retrospect, it was the best thing I could have done. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, what people were doing is they were installing the kits. They were going, wow, this is working great. I know what to do, but I have no idea why I'm doing it. And so people would, actually a friend of mine came to me and he says, have you ever thought about teaching a seminar and teaching the secrets? And I went, that sounds crazy. Because the secrets really are hard fought. In fact, I labored under a certain impression as far as how suspension worked. The real key thing or tricky thing with motocross and dirt bike stuff is how do you make it plush and firm at the same time? And I labored under a certain impression as to how to do that for a long time and had good results, had happy riders. But the actual concept of taking it and having other people work with me as opposed to was kind of a part of the thing of teaching a seminar. And so my friend asked me, have you ever thought of teaching the secrets? I thought, that's crazy. And I go, okay, let's do it. And I placed a little tiny ad in Cycle News, and we had 50 students in the first seminar, and they came from all over the place. I had an engineer from Chrysler Corporation. I had literally university professors and team managers and on and on. And I'm just sitting in front of this whole room kind of going, well, I don't know what you guys are going to get here, folks, but let's go. And so the seminars really has been, kind of a context or an entire thought process shift for my business and really for the industry. And at this point in time, if you look around the industry at the people that are actually doing suspension, there are quite a high number of people that have actually either worked for me or certainly have taken the suspension seminars. Really, anybody that's interested in suspension, we virtually have, like I was saying, university professors or team managers, and we will have kids' dads come in there that literally don't know which end of the adjuster, they know which end of the screwdriver to use, but, which end of the adjuster they don't really know. And some people, they come because they want to improve their own personal knowledge. And for some people, they want to be, the best tuner they can be as a dad. So, really a very, very broad range. We've had pretty much engineers from most of the major motorcycle manufacturers. We've had, just pretty much almost every walk of life. We've had plumbers that have come in and decided to change their careers and now are high-level suspension tuners, that are well known in the country. I don't know if it's so much a matter that the average tuner couldn't ever pick it up. With a really good testing procedure, you can figure things out without an engineering degree. And you can figure things out. In fact, you can actually make things work with an absolute backward concept of how suspension and physics works. So it's not as if people can't make things work without a really good education, but it certainly helps to have that education. I personally feel that a person that really wants to go into suspension and do it for a living, it's worth $250,000, $500,000. And that's my humble opinion. But really, to get the information, how do you do it? Either School of Hard Knocks and reading articles or what have you, or even an engineering degree, frankly, doesn't say here's how to make your suspension work better. So you really have to take all that stuff and apply it, and either through testing, R&D, whatever, you need to figure it out. And so yeah, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. The first portion is what I call the theory class, and we really go in there and we talk theory. Now, obviously the idea is to have practical knowledge come out of the theory, but my belief is that if you know the why, you can figure out the what. In a seminar, or even in a series of seminars, we take 6 days and talk about suspension. There's no possible way we can cover every scenario, every what. But if we cover the why and we cover the theory, and people get certain things out of the class that they can take home, then they've got a lot better chance at taking this stuff and applying it. So we start off with a theory class, and this really gets into, we really don't hang out a whole lot in math, because frankly most people don't really have that great of a background in math, but we'll talk about some theory and concepts, that kind of thing. Then we go into the shop skills class, which is really, hey, watch me take stuff apart, or some of my techs, or whatever, and the guys have been doing it for years and years and years, and we go into nth degree detail on how to actually work on suspension. So not only things that as far as the basics of taking it apart and putting it back together again, but also little tricks in how can I save a little bit of time here if I'm doing it for a living? How can I set up my workspace so that I'm more efficient? And certainly things that will help as far as making sure that you do high quality work that assists you in the liability department. And then the third class is what we call the advanced class, and the advanced class really is kind of continuing on from the theory class. And so it's not where people go, ooh, it's like this is way too advanced and all this math. They actually, the very first advanced seminar I did was way too much math. And I had some students ask me, say, well, where will we ever use this? And I actually said, well, I don't know, but isn't it cool? And anyway, what I've done is I've changed that to really, we do things like understanding leverage ratio curves. And so linkages and that kind of thing. We understand, look at data acquisition, and how do we take data acquisition and take information out of the, squiggly lines, and how do we take that and make changes to our suspension? And really I believe that a master of anything is a master of the basics. And so we continue to review basics and as we move on even into advanced stuff. So those are really the three classes. Absolutely, without a doubt. And certainly it helps to be a bit mechanically inclined. I mean, there are some people that, let's face it, are a little bit more mechanically inclined than other people are. So it helps to have kind of a common sense, which, you've heard the old saying, common sense isn't common. But a decent understanding of mechanics. There are some things that, we talk about things like you don't want to take a pair of vice grips and clamp onto the damping rod, which, we'll talk about stuff like that, and it's almost like we'll chuckle about it, but you would blow your mind at how many sets of suspension that we've taken apart that have vice grips marks in the damping rod. And the damping rod obviously is an area that goes through a seal that would then destroy the seal and the bushing and whatever. And so, but if you have a basic understanding and you have an interest in it, when you buy a gold valve kit, you get a video with it, you get an instruction with it, and you also get technical support, so if you get stuck, you can call down. And I have people that sit on the phone and answer technical questions, virtually all day long. And so with that, yeah, we've got guys. I mean, frankly, we've had guys that take it apart and go, I'm stuck, and they call up, and my guys will walk them through it. If you've done suspension one time, the very first time that you've ever done it is the hardest time you'll ever do it. But once you've done it one time, the second one you go, oh, that was easy. It's kind of like putting those, the bolt together furniture. It's like you read that, you go, what are all these parts, but once you do it, you go, that was easy. Why was I stressing over that, So like I said, to answer, kind of long answer to a short question, yeah, people can come in, take the seminar, and certainly, if they're interested and they pay attention, they can go out and do their own suspension. In fact, that's one of the most, the comments that I get that I love the best is that guys will get done after the seminar, and I have them do a little evaluation. They just say, I can't wait to go home and take apart my suspension.
Coming up on part 3, Paul talks about some very cool Go Fast components and some of the latest race tech products. All that and more coming up on Cycle Sports TV.